Hi, my name is Ken Davis with Performance Air Conditioning of Texas, and I'm here with
Evan Bachwig, All Mold Pro. This is a super common thing that I see in my inspections. Interior insulated plenums that have mold growth in them. What's causing that mold growth? We know it needs moisture and organic material. Where's the moisture problem coming in there? Because it doesn't happen on every system.
Sure. So that's kind of a twofold problem.
Split it up.
And as many problems are, it's rarely one thing that
Of course.
causes it. And thing number two, moisture in the
Yeah.
house, right? We live in an environment here in Texas where we are constantly battling humidity. And we need to keep that humidity within a range.
Yep.
So down to 35% is probably okay, up to 60% is probably okay.
Good luck
Now,
getting to 35, right?
yeah, now the from the comfort perspective, more that's more of a winter thing.
Yeah.
But from the comfort perspective, if we can keep that humidity anywhere 45 to 50, 55%, like people are generally pretty happy.
Right.
So, first of all, controlling the humidity
Yep.
and you're not going to hit those dew point temperatures where
Right.
you're starting to make moisture if humidity is actively controlled. Secondly is the food, right? The food source for the mold having really good filtration. So we really keep the inside of that plenum clean. Will do, will help prevent the growth of mold.
Awesome.
And those are the two things that we kind of routinely look at and address.
Looking for filter bypass where the filter is crumpled or not seated correctly. That's where the dust is getting in, and that's what it's growing in. I assume once it gets introduced to the moisture, and then once it's into the plenum.
Yeah, we really like a filtration system called April Air, and the reason what I like about it is the fact that it actually locks into place and really helps reduce filter bypass. Another filter that we've used quite a bit as of recent is Zephyr filters because it actually has a gasketed system around it.
I haven't seen
And
those.
not that I'm, sponsored by any of those filter manufacturers. Those are just the two that we kind of routinely go to because of how they perform, and they have low pressure drops. You can absolutely put in a filter that causes harm to your HVAC system and it'll worsen the problem because it'll slow down airflow, make it colder, make moisture worse. So it's a balance of trying to get the proper amount of filtration, the highest MERV rating that we can get without causing a problem, which there's some techniques to,
Right.
help with that. And then still, make sure we don't get filter bypass and to make sure that the air moves across the filter at a certain rate. The faster that air goes, the more, you know, dirt, shall we say, will
Right.
get through it. And so that's some of the stuff we
Makes
look
good
at.
sense. I'm a big fan of April as well. I have those same filters at my house, and it has been and functionally out in the field. I'm looking at a filter 5, 6 times a day some days, and I consistently see April Air performing well because of that rail system. I'll have to look at that other brand. That's really interesting.
Yeah, we're starting to use that where there's the ceiling filters and
Yes.
such,
Yep.
because typically those are 1 inch filters, and so you put that in. You don't have much filtration. It has a lot of pressure drop, and then if you actually look around the edges, you'll actually see dirt around all of
Yeah.
that, and that's where the air is kind of bypassed and got dirt. With the Zephyr system, it has a 1 inch lip, and then it goes in and
seen
up
those.
into the cavity of that space, so
Yep.
you actually get a media quality filter, even though it's for a
I have
ceiling
seen
return.
those.
And that is a wonderful system that we've started
That's great to know.
using.
That is actually my favorite place to get dust for a mold toxin panel. As I pull that filter out, and there's that big thick line around the filter on the ceiling, and that's my favorite place to get dust because it's always there.
Yeah, interesting.
Do you ever recommend just doing some blue painter's tape on that gap to
Yeah,
seal that? Does that work?
yeah, it absolutely works,
Okay.
and we have done that in the past where we actually left blue tape for the customer and sealed it up.
Yep.
But honestly, the next time we're back out there, I never find the blue painter's tape on.
Let's do a better upgrade.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if we can put that Zephyr filtration system in there, it's easy to change and does a phenomenal job.
Why do I see mold growth around supply vents so often?
Oh, very common complaint for us, right? And I think as you pointed out, people see it, they immediately go into panic mode. Oftentimes, it's I mean, obviously we don't want that
Right.
for aesthetic reasons and also health reasons, but probably not as big of a deal as
I
what
agree.
some people are saying. But the reason that's happening is, once again, it goes back to humidity and dew point, right? And so if you have high humidity in the home, and then of course you've got cold air coming out of those vents, you're going to hit dew point very easily in that spot. you get moisture there. Perhaps also you have a little bit inadequate filtration in the system. And between those two problems, you're just going to end up with a little bit of growth.
Does taking that register off and sealing the gap between the duct boot and the sheetrock, does that make a difference?
Oh, absolutely it
Okay.
does. Yeah, because you're going to get hot, humid air from the attic that oftentimes drifts through there. And then, of course, that's really going to make it hit dew point quickly. So they should be sealed. However, as you know as well as I do, many times they're not sealed. And so anytime you have unconditioned attic space and then you have conditioned space below, if you're getting any place you're getting hot, humid air in, you have some potential issues.
Is that the Venturi effect? Where it's pulling attic air with it?
Yeah, I don't know.
I think that's what it is.
I mean, maybe because that air then goes into that boot and comes out the register, so like it's going to kind of like turn and spin at that space a little bit. So
awesome. In a retrofit application, HVAC is failing. It's reached its age. It's time to change it out. Should consumers be asking for things like a load calculation and a manual J and manual T, manual D? This level of planning for ductwork, is it possible in retrofit from a budget perspective and a time perspective? I'd like to hear your perspectives on that.
So absolutely yes. I mean, sometimes we look at duct, we're like, hey, your duct work is solid, adequate returns, adequate supplies to handle the load. A decent amount of time, especially since sometimes we're downsizing. So maybe it was undersized, but we're like, hey, we're dropping a ton here.
Yeah.
So
that's a great point.
It actually should be within size now. I will tell you this, the times I've, kind of rushed things through and gotten myself in trouble and had those learning moments.
Yep.
Is generally revolved not around the equipment as much as the ductwork. So we put in this great piece of equipment and realize like, oh no, now we have to upgrade ductwork.
Yeah.
And then you have to have that uncomfortable conversation like, yeah, I know it was going to be this, but we need to talk about more work. So I would much rather have that on the front end. I will say sometimes customers aren't interested in that conversation. And, at that point we just kind of have to give them the limits of what their system can do.
What are some of the things that you offer as a company to help kind of zero in on exactly what the consumer needs?
Well, there's several things, and you asked earlier about manual J's, and so for the people that aren't familiar, a manual J is a load calculation, okay? And there's different ways we do that. So we use a couple different softwares to do manual J's. In new construction, we use something called RightSoft. It's the one that's probably been around the longest. It's kind of the old one, well proven. I really like RightSoft. There's a substantial learning curve to it. I will tell you this: the first couple load calcs you do with it, it takes like a day, and the more you use it, the faster you get with it, right? And you kind of learn those shortcuts. But it's very good. And then we use another product called Conduit Tech, and that's for retrofit situations. And what we'll use is the LiDAR scanner within our iPads, and then that software basically creates a 3D map of the house. And then we put in, some data about the house, right? Because you can scan the house, but we have to tell the software what kind of windows there are.
Right.
We have to make an estimate of insulation, and that's the hard part, right?
Truly.
Is estimating that insulation and estimating the potential air leak. And then, and sometimes, like when we have questions about it, we'll kind of promote to the customer the idea of doing a blower door test on their house to really kind of cue in on that a little bit more precisely.
And that's a huge piece. I mean, starting with the blower door, an energy audit more commonly is a fundamental part of understanding what does the home need. And that's where we start to get into multi-day process on just getting the customer what they need, bringing in other trades, and that gets complicated. But to those that are watching this is one of the biggest purchases you'll make on a house, an improvement. And you have to live with this. It's like buying a car. You have to live with this for 10, 15 years. And so it can be hard to spend that money up front, especially on a system that you don't see. But from the environmental side, if you can spend the money up front to get it right, it's well worth it.
And we have kind of conflicting interest here, right? And the fact that we obviously want this thing sized appropriately so it dehumidifies well. And I think that's something we should dive into later, why that's the case. But we absolutely want that. On the other hand, customers have an expectation because oftentimes they've lived in houses with oversized systems. They come in, it's 80 degrees in the house, they turn the system down, they expect it to rapidly drop temperature even when it's 105 degrees outside. And by virtue of it doing that, we know the system is oversized.
Yep.
And so some of it is setting expectations, figuring out what the customer's expectations are. And you know what? I'm gonna be the first to admit something here. Sometimes we have to cheat this a little bit because we interview the customer, we find out that like they are going to be very unsatisfied with an appropriately sized system. And so we may very slightly oversize that and do that with the safety net of building in supplemental dehumidification.
I think it's really smart.
And so you can get by with a little bit more room to do that if you have a strategy to dehumidify that house. Now, some customers are very satisfied with the fact of having the unit the appropriate size. And so, you know, we kind of play with those numbers a little bit. And a lot of HVAC people won't admit that.
Yep.
But that is the reality of it. You do have to keep customers happy and at the same time not have mold growing in the house, not wearing the equipment out prematurely because it's constantly on and off. And on and off.
Yeah, and I appreciate your candor because we need to be realistic about this because ultimately it is their money. We're not doing this as a charity. This isn't a Habitat for Humanity house that we could do everything that we want. This is their money. And if they have an expectation and we are forcing something on them that we need them to like from a building science perspective, that's not how business works.
Yeah, well, and you know, at the end of the day, they're not going to pick our bid if we're telling them like, hey, we want to size this system so it matches the humidity load. But here's the side effects of that. And they're like, no, I don't want that. So I'm going to pick this other system, which may be not as well installed, have all of these other problems. And they just didn't necessarily, you know, discuss those issues with them. Just like, hey, cold air blows out of the thing, we must be good.
And comfort is relative. I have learned that. I have clients that it is 85 degrees in their house and it is 60%. And I'm like, are you okay? And they're like, yeah, this feels good. And I'm like, okay, and there's other people that they have to have it at 68 at all times, all year round, no change.
I use that thing. We have a different expectation of comfort today than what we had even 15 years ago, right? And I'll give you this example. Let's say we could magically go back into time to like 1860, right? And we brought us a window unit and put that window unit in a house and let people have a little bit of air conditioning. They would think, oh, my house is so comfortable, right? Because what did they have? You know, some open windows, maybe some fans that turn with some, you know, some belts and pulleys and things like that. And, you know, you would think that's a wonderful thing. Now, if the only air conditioning we dropped in your house was a window unit today, would you be happy with me about that?
I would not be happy.
Oh, look, so here's my air conditioning design. I'm going to put a window unit here and here and here. What should be good? Yeah, and so like over time, we've readjusted that expectation. And the same happens with dehumidification.
Yes.
Once you start to get a house appropriately balanced and you get that thing dehumidified, you kind of actually readjust the person's scale a little bit. And that's good and bad in the fact that they may tend to want to complain a little bit more if, you know, like, oh, well, this room's 2 degrees warmer than this room. You wouldn't have even noticed that in the past. And people are noticing things like that now. People are walking around with sensors and checking temperatures, checking humidity, VOCs, CO2 in different rooms. And you know, I mean, like there's, I guess, some reasonable level of variation in there. It's even allowed in the, you know, the design manuals, but we also want to make sure that each room is reasonably comfort, you know, has good air quality in each room. And those are just things that almost have become a new problem that wasn't the case.
Different demands.
Yep, different demands. All right, thanks for joining us today. My name is Ken Davis with Performance Air Conditioning of Texas. If you have any questions or would like a consult, you can reach us at www.pactx.org or 972-291-9231.
I am Evan with All Mold Pro. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram at All Mold Pro. You also can reach out to us at 972-567-7298. We help with mold, mycotoxin, VOC, and mystery illnesses.